Welcome back from the break. In this module 2 of this learning path, we are going to talk about the web application migration itself. And I'm going to show you quite a lot of things. We are going to talk about tools and also best practices to do the migration. You'll see also a demo, which is really about migrating the application itself and then configuring it. So that should be very exciting. Let's get started with module 2. So this here is about upgrading the web application to app services. We are going to actually physically move the application from your premise into Azure and into app services. And again, a quick reminder, there are a few reasons why people are migrating to the cloud. And we talked about that more in detail in the first session, so I'm not going back into every one of those points. But I want to mention specifically for web application, the application innovation that you can bring to your application into Azure is really fantastic. You can easily leave your web server untouched so that it runs perfectly fine, but then you add around it some services, for example, using serverless applications, using cognitive services for artificial intelligence and to add new things into your app. Or maybe you want to have a mobile backend, for example, so that you have a mobile companion for your web application, which again runs completely untouched. So this is really a good set of reasons to move into the cloud. And again, if we remember the migration journey, the 4 stages that I talked about in the first session, we are going now from assessment into the migration itself. Couple of recommendations that I want you to remember. Do the assessment first because this is your peace of mind, and also don't start with your most critical workload. You want to start with a small workload. Here in that case, you are migrating a rewards application, so it is a public facing application, but it is not as critical to Tailwind Traders' business as, for example, the main website, which is really public facing. So in Azure and at Microsoft in general, you know that we love developers, all right? We have famous videos of our former CEO who was, shouting developers, developers, developers. We love developers, but we also love IT pro, and we have tools for really everybody. For example, during the development phase, we have Visual Studio, right? This is the king of IDEs, the integrated development environment where I spent really most of my professional career. I love this tool. It's getting better with every release. But if you have needs, for example, to develop on, let's say, a Mac or on Linux, we have Visual Studio Code. I even use Visual Studio Code on Windows, for example, to write text files, to write markdown files, to run my blog. You can also create .NET applications using Visual Studio Code. So it is a very, very powerful development environment, but it is also more lightweight than Visual Studio. We also have code spaces, GitHub code spaces. Now this is an exciting new opportunity that you have to run your development environment in the cloud, and then you connect to it either through a web browser with a UI, or you can even have a thin shell of Visual Studio. So you just install really the UI of Visual Studio. Like this, you have all the shortcuts that you love, etc. But the environment itself is running into the cloud, and that allows you to very easily have multiple environments. For example, one for client if you're in the consulting business. So that's pretty cool. In the delivery phase, we have you covered. We have Azure DevOps, we have GitHub Actions. The difference in both is, sometimes a little bit confusing, but really what we can say is that GitHub Actions, we have a lot of investment going into GitHub Actions at the moment. You can do a lot of things. It's very comfortable. You have your actions, which are really a part of your repository. Azure DevOps is where we have a little bit more functionality at the moment. You have things like deployment gates, for example, etc. But basically what I'm trying to tell you here is that whatever you're trying to do and whatever environment you prefer, we have you covered. We also have tools to operate your application, and you know that once it is developed and deployed, this is when I would say the real work really starts, because this is where you want to monitor your application. We have Azure Monitor. We'll talk more about that in the 5th session of this learning path. We have automation systems. We have also the security center, because you really don't want hackers to access your users' data, to access your application, to cause trouble. And so you know that even the bigger firms have these kind of issues sometimes. And so the Azure Security Center is